Good singing. You can be seated. Oh, man. Are you, though? Like, are we our own? Are you laying yourself down? It's a beautiful song, but it's also a tall order. One of the things we want to do, and it actually ties in really, really well with the sermon this morning and kind of the direction we're going, but as a church, we are trying to lean in to prayer so much more. We kind of recognize that while we never abandoned prayer, we certainly have not, been maximizing it. We kind of dipped our toe in the pool and didn't really go much further than that. There is such depth and so much that we're missing. So we're trying to go deeper in prayer because, it's nice, if you can come here and we can deliver a good message on Sunday and sing some good songs, but if we're skipping the prayer part, if we're lacking in the prayer part, we are missing a lot of the communication of what it is to have a relationship with God. So that's what we want to do this morning. We want to take a little bit of a time to have some focused prayer. We're going through this series, Recapture, so we want to pray for our parents, for our families, and really beyond that, for anybody who's working, with kids or has that opportunity to influence the younger generation, which is pretty much all of us. Jody Potter was here this morning, and she and some of her staff were in attendance. They're going off and they're doing summer camp this week. So whether, children are born to you, whether or not, you have them as family living in your home right now, we all want to be thinking about like what we're doing to impact this generation and recapturing home as the center of spiritual growth. So join me this morning. We're going to pray for a little time here.
Lord, thank you for the people sitting here, Father. Thank you that they have come to fill themselves, to lay themselves down to you, Lord, to see where you will take them so that they can be the light in their community, Father. And Lord, I pray that as they are interacting with the younger generation, Lord, that you give them the words, you give them the strength, you give them the understanding, the connection with the kids that they are talking to, so that they can be your light and show your love to those that they are coming in interaction with each day, Lord. I pray as a community that we can come together, that we can find a space to just show who you are, to build you into our daily lives as people, as parents, as those who are influencers in our community, Lord, that we can build you up and pour you out to those who we come in contact with every day, Lord.
Lord, let it truly be a joy to say your will and your way. Whether that costs us something, whether it doesn't, Lord, let us seek after you so that we are leading from the front, that we are a role model for our kids, whether that be by birth or whether that just be by influence, Lord. Let us be the ones taking those steps and leading. I pray for our families. I pray for our kids that, Lord, in a confusing world out there, that your light shine through, that your voice be heard, that our parents, though they may feel unqualified, know that you put them there for a reason, that you have called them to this, and Lord, that you are with them, and through you we can do anything. Help us to feel that empowerment, Lord. Help us to recognize that you are there and you are calling us to this, and no task is too big for you, Lord. Though the enemy may be big, though the enemy might be fierce, it is nothing compared to you. Help us to just be on task, Lord, and recognize that there is a battle to be fought, that our kids are at stake, and that we want to do well for them, Lord, that we want to seek after you every single day. Amen. So it's kind of on that note that I must deliver some bad news, especially those of you who have, kind of the teenage, the youth age. In general, I have to report, ladies and gentlemen, your kids have been kidnapped. They have been taken by those who want to use them, exploit them, who care nothing for them except what they can get from them. They have been taken by people who want them for their money, who just want their support, their validation, their attention, or to advance a social or political agenda. Here's what's worse, though. Not only have your kids been taken, to some degree or another, you're okay with it. Your kids' minds are being taken over. They are being recruited to follow and endorse and support things that you do not approve of, things that you know are dangerous to them. And along that way, because of the monumental task, many of us kind of throw up our hands and we let it happen. This should be a bit of a wake-up call sort of sermon. Not to lay a guilt trip, but to motivate us to reclaim a role in which we are protectors of our kids. We're not passive. We go through that kind of car seat stage, right? Where they're little and they're fragile and we're looking out for every little thing that could hurt them, taking care of them. Someone kidnaps our kids physically, man, I don't know. As a dad, I'm going Liam Neeson on them. Someone's after my kids' minds, I should have some of the same dedication. And yet, while we're aggressive in protecting them from physical threats, we're often very passive in protecting them from the mental ones and protecting their minds. This morning, as we're going down this series of Recapture, we're looking at recapturing morality in the home. And this is a big task. I know that I'm asking something big. I know I'm laying it on pretty thick this morning, but I'm hoping we at least can catch some spark and some motivation and some drive to do things a little bit differently. We've all heard, I've referenced it as a proverb. It's not actually a proverb. I had to look it up and make sure it was actually from the Bible. It's one of those things, like you hear this phrase often enough and it's like, is that the golden rule or is that from the Bible or what is that? But it is a verse. It's from 1 Corinthians, and we've heard this, like very much shared as a proverb. Bad company corrupts good morals. And in the 21st century now, I think I want to update this just a little bit. Not because I've dug into the Hebrew and I've found a word that fits better. That's true. I think that's what they meant back then because that's kind of the influences they had were the company that they kept. They didn't have the computers and the internet and TVs and all that. But I think we have seen it play out. I think we can realistically say it's not just the company that you keep and the people you're around. It's the influence that corrupts good morals. Bad influence corrupts good morals. And indeed it has, because in our modern age, we have influence coming from all directions. We got TV, like streaming, not like, you wait until like 6:30 when your favorite show comes on, but you can watch this stuff ad nauseum. We got video games, we got music, social media of all kinds, TikTokers, like they're even called influencers. That's what they go by. Like that's what they're asking for. That's what they're seeking and trying to build is influence. That's the power and the currency that they tend to work through. There's influence everywhere. And we see this happening and playing out because none of those things, like TV and social media, those are okay things as long as they're good things. But bad influence corrupts good morals. And our culture is this growing and evolving beast right now. It used to be kind of a different animal that, when I was younger, like it could leave you alone. Like the culture was doing its thing and you could kind of join on or not, but that was about it. Now our culture is hungry for our kids. It is impatient with anything that is not keeping pace with it. It wants to ostracize and demonize anything that isn't on board with its agenda. Not only do you have to accept this, but that's not enough. You have to agree with the things that it's putting out, but agreeing is not enough. You have to affirm what is being put out, and then they ask, because that's not enough, you have to celebrate whatever it is that is being put out. Otherwise, you are backwards, you are a bigot, you are hateful if you don't go along with all these things. And I don't have to dig too far into some of the headlines and the goings on to be able to assess the damage and see what this is. And in writing this, I'm going to go off my notes fairly tightly here because I have to choose some of my words carefully here Otherwise, I'm going to deliver an R-rated sermon. We got kids in here. I abandoned the idea. I was going to have a slide for each of these, and it's like, I can't do it. So let's look at a couple things here. We probably were aware of the abortion argument, Supreme Court ruling and things like that, which, would seem on the surface to be a victory, but that's not necessarily the case because it goes to the heart of the matter. But so an unborn baby compared to what is out there right now. If a baby is born at 24 weeks, a little preemie baby, as soon as it's breathing air, it is protected by the same laws that protect you and me. In many states, up to 9 months full term, so long as that baby has not breathed air yet, you can discard it quite violently, actually, for any reason at all. It's usually either a painful poison or dismemberment. Child mutilation right now is in vogue. I'm not even going to go to the larger, just kind of the transgender issue, but we're talking about kids. What is being done to kids in the name of their happiness and their pursuit of what they perceive themselves to be? It's irreparable damage being done physically. Sexual education, not a bad thing on the surface. Kindergartners, not that uncommon. And we're not talking about vague concepts. We're talking about some very specific things being addressed to kindergartners. Groups of teachers now, this is happening all across, Virginia and Oregon are the two that are in the headlines right now, in which teachers are giving out assignments in which they are encouraging the kids, do not let your parents know about this. The most recent one in Oregon was brought to light because a dad talked to his daughter about the assignment that she was doing. They had a wheel in the front of the classroom that listed different acts and orifices, and they were given the assignment as they went down these different things to not only talk about what they would subscribe to, but to write the initials of a person that they would choose to do these things with. To mostly quote this father, I'm going to leave a couple of these blank. He says, "Now I don't know what's worse, wanting to know my child's sexual fantasy or who they're going to have a fill-in-the-blank X-rated or a fill-in-the-blank triple X-rated." I'm assuming here, not firsthand. But drag queen story hours are all over the news. That's a thing in and of itself. Just over a week ago, there was one in which this isn't 21 years and older, Saturday night at the local bar, where you expect a little bit of off-color humor. This is one of those family-friendly, all ages welcome. Please come to this drag queen stand-up comedy routine in which they're referencing weightlifting of female body parts. Our drug use in this country is up. I didn't put the chart up there, but through COVID and just a couple years prior, it had been trending up and up and up and up, and we started to do this exponential sort of growth where it just up it's going. The drug use deaths are skyrocketing, but conversely, our public perception of drugs being a problem is down 10% almost across the board. Rural and city. Our perception of it is that it is less of a problem, even though more and more people are becoming addicted and dying. God as a culture does not exist. However, anything else that you want to do, follow your heart, get your power crystals and things like that into alignment, that's okay. You can be a boy, you can be a girl, you can be a cat, you can be just about anything you want to be. And no one will say anything contrary to it unless you are somebody with morality, or even worse, sometimes a Christian. You can live your best life now, according to Joel Osteen. Why did I put that on the list with abortion and child mutilation? Because it actually fits the mold. Many of us as well have absorbed what I would call one of the most terrifying and deadly cultural lies that have ever been sold. And here it is. Be happy. It's cute. It's not really terrifying, is it? But if we absorb the whole message, all this cultural messaging, we have done a tremendous amount of damage. Because when this becomes too important, it allows us to change all kinds of things. What has happened culturally is that good and evil have been rebranded and sold to us, and we have accepted it. Nowadays, in our culture and in many of our homes, personal happiness is God. And personal happiness, therefore, of course, is good. And anything that interferes with personal happiness is evil. We hear it, right? In the phrasing and in the attitudes. Who are you to judge? It can be applied to just about any topic. Well, if it makes them happy, anything is acceptable. It is a new morality. We have accepted that being happy is the most important thing. Anything that gets in the way of being happy is bad. Happy, good. Anything else, bad. And that's how it can go so far. That's how we can justify things like infanticide or mutilating kids or any of the things that I put on that list, a lot of things that didn't even make that list. So please understand, many of the people who are promoting this, they're not evil people. They just either grew up or in this or they fell for the rebranding of what God is, of what good and evil is. It fits their definitions. That's how we get there. Yes, I may have a human baby living inside of me. But if you're not ready for that, if that doesn't fit what is going to help you to pursue personal happiness, go ahead and discard it. Yes, that's a fully, healthy human baby boy or baby girl, 4-year-old. But if she says that she's a she, you got to cut off anything that doesn't match that, or vice versa. Because what's most important is being happy. We can justify all kinds of things by this definition. And it's easy when we go down this list. Do we point the finger or kind of throw up our hands? Oh my goodness, it's so terrible. But are we really any better? Kids look at the pursuit of happiness as God, and sometimes they see us doing the same things, just in different ways. We follow this God, maybe to a lesser degree, but we're trying to walk this line, trying to kind of get both happiness and morality. We're trying to kind of skirt the issue. We want our personal happiness, and we want to kind of bring God along with it. Think about our motivations. How much are we pursuing what God has called us to versus how much are we pursuing those nice vacations? That nice, security, the money in the bank, the 401k, the toys, oh my goodness, the cars, the boats, whatever it might be. See, I wanted this. When I started writing this was going to be a sermon about the kids, how to kind of fix some things, come in as parents and, just kind of reset and do a better job. It'd be easy to do it that way and just be like, oh my goodness, these youth today, they're so messed up. This is how we can fracture those lies. They fell for them, and we're going to fracture these lies, and we're going to get them back on the path. But it's not just them. If we want to lead people out of some of these cultural traps, it starts with us. If you were here a couple weeks ago, we did this Habits of the Household sermon, and the phrase that I really emphasized in that really, really stood out to me from the book is that we become our habits and our kids become us. And some of our kids already are living byproducts of a household that is pursuing happiness more than it is pursuing God. They might be following different cultural things and different cultural beliefs than we are, but they're following a learned pattern. Do what makes you happy. Follow whatever makes you happy. That's what mom and dad do, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it in different ways. And so we're going to retrace a couple little steps here because we had the habits of the household, and there's that verse there that, the fear of the Lord is a secure fortress, and for their children it will be a refuge. Some of that refuge we talked about a little bit, but that refuge is who God is. It's the morality that he brings. We need to set God first and our own happiness second. If we can do that, that creates a fixed point in that household. You want that to be the order of priority in your home. Whatever God says first, just like we were singing a few minutes ago in that song, God first and our will second. So I'd love to give you like 3 steps to create a perfect teenager. I can't. I don't even have a teenager yet. But I do know, having been one once and being around plenty of them, the teenage years and the young adult life are just kind of inherently messy. It just kind of comes with that territory of like, you don't have a whole lot of experience. You're trying to figure things out. You're kind of becoming your own person. So, even those that stay on the right path, it's still kind of tumultuous. There's a balance. Some of us have to learn the hard way. Some of us are going to follow the right pathways, and some of us it's a bumpier road than not. Some things work out, some don't. So the 3 steps that I want to go over is just kind of hopefully a game plan to kind of recapture morality of the home. Home is what sets them up for the future. Home hopefully becomes a fixed point, a good thing of reference that even if they have a bumpy road, they can always come back to it. So think back to like Noel's power chart, if you were here last week. That as you get old, as the child gets older, your power tends to decline. They get more independence, they start calling more of the shots, and that's just kind of the inevitable growth of it. That's fine. But the one line that was in there that Noel showed at the end was that line of influence. That even though like you can only control your kid for so long, they're going to go be their own person, that your influence hopefully stays and hopefully grows. And that's a bit of what I want to reference this morning. We're not necessarily talking about like a perfect parenting strategy so much as like, how are you going to be influencing your kid and how is it going to help them along the way? I love this picture of a lighthouse, like what a lighthouse is and represents to the ships. A lighthouse is that fixed point. It is somewhere on solid ground that a ship out, far into the sea, especially in a storm, the lighthouse becomes extremely valuable because as that ship is bouncing around and everything, it has that fixed point on the horizon to guide it back to a safe harbor. Our kids need that. I was lucky enough to have that somewhat as a teen and young adult, that there was a reference point. I went out and made some of my mistakes. I rebelled in some areas. I came back to it because of what my parents had taught me. So think about that fixed point and that lighthouse picture is what we want to be for our kids, because they will make their own decisions. They might choose to just kind of follow this right off the bat. They might choose to walk away from it completely. But whether they ever come back or not, there's a fixed point there. There's a reference if they ever want to come back to it. So here are the steps if we want to try and turn this around a little bit. Step number 1, we have to fix the foundation of the home. This is somewhat, as I've already talked about, God has got to come first in the house. We need to abandon the whole happiness bandwagon. I want to give you a little story here from Acts chapter 5. It's pretty long, so I'm going to summarize parts of it. But some of the disciples had been out, doing what they do. They were healing people. They were preaching. There was a lot of response. And as went with the time, that also invited a lot of criticism. It made some people angry. So they got arrested and thrown in jail. While they were in jail, guess what they're doing? They're preaching to people. An angel comes through the one night and unlocks the doors and lets them out. What do they do with their freedom? They went right back to preaching to people. So this is where the story comes in. It says someone came and said, "Look, the men you put in jail are standing in the temple courts teaching people." At that, the captain went with the officers and brought the apostles. They took them back to the Sanhedrin to be questioned by the high priest. He says, "We gave you strict orders not to teach in this name. Yet you filled Jerusalem with your teaching and you're determined to make us guilty." Peter and the other apostles replied, "We must obey God rather than human beings." He goes on with a little bit more of an explanation. They are angry at this response from the apostles. They're ready to, throw the book at them. A Pharisee ends up kind of intervening and telling, the powers that be to basically let them go. He said, if their purpose or activity is of human origin, it'll fail. Whatever. It's not going to go. But if it is from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will only find yourselves fighting against God. His speech persuaded them. They called the apostles in and had them flogged. Slap on the wrist back then. Then they ordered them not to speak in the name of Jesus and let them go. What do you think the apostles did? Left the Sanhedrin rejoicing because they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. Day after day in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. Did not learn their lesson one bit, nor should they. So there's some of Noel's corporal punishment from back in the day. They let them off easy. All right, just flog them for a while and then turn them loose. But is that living your best life now? Does that jive with our culture? You're out there, just preaching and teaching, which isn't, that's not pursuit of happiness to begin with. You're concerned with other people. You get to jail, you get out, you go back to jail, you get flogged, you go do the same thing over again. But what was he saying? We must obey God rather than human beings. As leaders of the households, we need to stop muddying the waters for our kids by chasing entertainment and happiness instead of following Jesus. That doesn't abandon the idea of happiness. We all enjoy being happy, and God enjoys blessing us with things that make us happy. Jonah used this a few weeks ago in one of his sermons. He was talking in Matthew 7:9 about the good gifts that God gives us. It says, which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for fish, will give him a snake? Outside of the Argot household, because we love snakes. But if you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven have good gifts for those who ask him? So this is not like we get this mixed up where it's like this drudgery call to bear our cross and we have to suffer for the cause of Christ. That's not it. It's not that you can't be happy, but man, we get our priorities messed up. This is a big deal. For a lot of us, I am asking to break a paradigm of the way we've been living our lives, of just seeking happiness. For some of us, our lifestyle is that lifestyle. Do what makes you happy. Even if you proclaim the name of God, you're hoping that God makes you happy, that he's along for the ride and he's going to give you the stuff to help you have this happy life. You missed it if that's the case. God is everything. God should be the whole picture. He's a good God. He delights in our happiness at times. He also, as we saw in the story, occasionally might ask you to get thrown in jail or flogged for him along the way. And that's okay. This is the biggest thing you can do. This is a personal issue, but this becomes a parenting issue because we lead from the front. If you are arguing against all those cultural things that I listed at the beginning of this, but you are still not pursuing God more than you're pursuing your self-interest, you are trying to argue without a leg to stand on. God coming first in the house creates that fixed point, that lighthouse reference, a different lifestyle than what is going on out there and what's being preached out there, in which everything revolves around your happiness, which is a fleeting thing anyway, isn't it? Our entire culture is built around personal fulfillment and personal gain and personal happiness. So with all that obsession over it, we should be the happiest nation in the world, right? We all just go skipping down the sidewalks everywhere we go. No, we're miserable. There's something so much more than just pursuing our own selfish gains. And following after God creates a fixed point and an alternative to that for when the floor comes out from under him. It's the most important part. I could end the sermon right here and not feel like I've wasted and missed much opportunity. Lead by example. Put God first. Let the happiness come as a byproduct of that. So 2 other things, but they come really as a distant second. Get this right before you worry too much about the other stuff. So that's step 1. We'll go fairly quickly through these other 2. Step 2, if you've seen Shark Tank, it's Kevin O'Leary's head in my brain again, but he says, stop the madness. Because some of it is. There are some things that are just plain silly that our kids are being asked to believe, and not just believe, but affirm and celebrate. And there are times in which correction is necessary. Stop the madness. You want to do that gently, you want to do that biblically, but stop the madness. Proverbs 29:15. It says, "The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother." That reproof, we kind of covered the rod part, discipline last week, but the reproof is the part I want to talk about. And there's different translations put it as like a godly correction. It's something a little bit stronger than just a point of clarification. Does godly correction happen in your home, especially as it pertains to morality? Correction in general is kind of lacking in our culture. We're pretty lax, like we want to give the kids everything, and so, we're careful about this, and we don't want to tread too hard. But at the same time, there are times in which correction is necessary, sometimes fairly firm. So it's close to discipline, but it's not quite the same. But these are the times in which you need to say things like, "No, that's wrong. That's not right." Maybe the answer to a question is a no, and here's why. Here's one. Parents, have you ever uttered these words? "We are taking the phone away." Maybe for an hour, maybe for a day, maybe you take it out and smash it with a hammer and we'll talk in a couple years. There are times, whatever it is, the phone, the internet, the video games or something, is it going away? Is it getting in the way of the family? Is it getting in the way of your relationship with God? Is it getting in the way of something that is more important than whatever the thing is? Because that provides a fixed point of priority. It'll say, God is more important than whatever's going on your phone. It says, the family is more important than the 5th hour of video games today. Whatever it might be, that priority communicates a lot. It's actually a way of protecting your kids from themselves and from some of that influence. It affirms the morality with those priorities, that there are certain lines that you do not cross. It recognizes much more important things and sets them up with an understanding of like, yeah, the phone is okay. Like, I'm not against kids having phones, but if it gets in the way of my kid's relationship with God, you can bet I don't mind using a hammer. You can bet I don't mind putting it on a shelf where they can't reach it for a while. Like, it's an order of priority. These things come first. The other stuff comes secondary. That reproof is needed at times, and it's missing in our culture in general, and it needs to be there. Sometimes it does seem a little bit harsh, but there are those times for it. The third thing is, speak the truth in love. This comes from the reference in Ephesians 4, where Paul is talking. He's not even talking specifically about youth. He's talking about the church there and the growth. But see if this doesn't sound kind of familiar. Ephesians 4, verse 14, it says, "Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming." Doesn't that sound a lot like today's youth? They fall for all kinds of things. Silly stuff that was crafted by cunning people. But this is where he lands with it. He's not ragging on them. He says, instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of him who is the head, that is Christ. This is that influence line that hopefully you maintain and cultivate through your kid's life. That you're still able to talk about important things so that you have a voice when it comes down to it. You can speak the truth in love and that they can hear it. It's kind of held in balance, where reproof is a little bit of the harsher stuff, but speaking the truth in love is that gentle side. Because there is a time for a hard line. Dads, we're kind of good at those tough lines at times. That as long as you live under this roof, you will, do this or not do this. Like, we can draw that line. There's a time for that, parents. You are in charge. Until they pay the rent, the phone bill, whatever it is your call. You have the final say. You can give some tough love. You can give some correction. That can also be abused. There is also time for the truth and love, just a simple and a gentle truth-telling of, no, that's not right, or, the Bible says this about it. I think you should reconsider. Everything, whether it's reproof, whether it's speaking the truth in love, whatever you do in the interaction with your kids, it all needs to come from that standpoint, though, in which following God is far, far more important than just being happy. That song, Lay Me Down, I think we have a reprise of it later on where let those things hit you. That's a big and bold claim to say, I am not my own. It'll be a joy to say, your will, your way. That's hard to say when sometimes his way means, we'll let you off easy and just give you a good flogging. But morality does not equal whatever makes you happy. That's not the highest priority. We know that there's a much bigger picture than that. That while God is concerned about the here and now, he created us to be eternal. There's a big picture beyond, 80, 90, 100 years that we might get here if we're lucky. And that's part of why, a flogging seems like getting off easy. We have a much bigger joy, a much bigger happiness to look forward to than just whatever we manufacture down here. So as I close, I'm wrapping up here, and there's a lot that could still be said. This is a huge topic, and I've given a couple kind of broad categories for this, but there's so much more. We haven't even gotten to any specifics in trying to refute any of these cultural lies that are out there, and even if we did, every kid is different, every household functions differently. There's not a prescription for this. What I hope that we gain from this is the motivation to recognize, number one, we got to make sure that we're not falling for the cultural lie. That little be happy sticker is not the God that we're following after. We're just looking for our own personal fulfillment and hoping we can use God to get there. But that we're following him no matter the cost. Whether he's blessing us with good gifts or whether he takes us to where flogging is going to be administered, we're following after him. Beyond that, I'm hoping that this is some motivation to take some further steps and some further analysis, to look inward at our households, as well as we did this about a year ago, and I want to do it again because I recognize we didn't touch on everything, and a lot of folks, if you weren't even here a year ago or didn't come to this, we did this Mama Bear apologetics kind of as a class. It was almost like a discussion group in a way as we went through this book. I know you can't read the tagline there, but it's empowering your kids to challenge cultural lies. The gist of this book really is just like a mama bear protects her cubs. You don't want to mess with a mama bear. She'll mess you up. She protects her cubs quite fiercely. We as parents need to do the same. But it's not enough to just protect our kids and shelter them from everything, because as we already know, they're eventually going to make their own decisions. They're going to be on their own. This is all about educating and equipping them, teaching them how to think and how to rationalize and how to have a solid understanding of morality so that they can engage it on their own terms and figure out the right answers. So this is not indoctrination. This is education. This is empowerment. This is growth. So if you are interested in that, we're going to form a class towards the end of summer, kind of like the back to school section. On that connection card, if you've already filled it out, if you haven't yet, put your name on there and just write Mama Bear. And we will form this and go through it. It's not a strict class, and it's not heavy reading, although it's fairly intellectual. But we want to go through some of these topics and look, because every household is different. Every kid is different. But we can look at some of the specific things, here's what is emerging from our culture, and here's how to walk through it and think through it and talk our kids through it so that they understand. They get why this is wrong and this is not. But they also do it very much in a gentle way, a loving sort of way. So mark that on the connection card if you'd like. We want the household, we want our lives to be a fixed point for our kids. They may follow it. They may not. More than likely, in a lot of ways, they'll try their own thing, kind of realize if that doesn't work, they'll often come around. But you're putting an anchor of morality in the home. You can recapture morality in the home and allow them to see that the order of priority is God first, happiness second. Oftentimes those two go together. I tend to find that people who are following God tend to be about the happiest people. The people who are living selfishly tend to be fairly miserable. That's not a guarantee, but that often comes with the territory. But if you bring morality into the home, that becomes the norm for them, and it follows them into theirs, into their adult life. So join me in prayer. Lord, if we want to do right by our kids, we do need to put you first. You understand this. You are the one to guide us. You are the one with the big plan and the big picture. And we want to follow in the direction that you lead, and not just whatever we think is going to make us happy at the time. You are God, and our happiness is not. Help us to seek after you, even if it does cost us. We love being happy, Lord, and we thank you for the blessings that you have given us, and we know that you are a good God that delights in the joy that the blessings you've given us bring us. But Lord, we also recognize that you have a big picture and a big plan, and that there's more to this story than just whatever fun we get to have right now. Help us to live this life and seek after you and be relentless after you and have a great relationship with you and following in your footsteps. Not just for our own sake, but because that's the fixed point that our kids need. That they can learn by our example. They can follow in those footsteps, and that they can know you. And then, Lord, help us to strike the right balance, to know when to bring correction, when to speak gentle truth, and to be able to have a relationship with these people that we love, Lord. We thank you for the children that you've given us. We know it's a big task to be entrusted with them, Lord, but we also know that you are the one who gave them to us, and that it was for a reason and a purpose, and that we are the ones called to do this, Lord. So help us to do well by our kids. Help us to raise them right. Help us to keep you as the priority so that they see that every day, Lord.